What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Week 22 Power Ranking Show on Twitter Spaces, as well as on the MLS Today Podcast Network. You can listen every Tuesday live at 2 p.m. Eastern on Twitter Spaces on my Twitter handle at Andrew_Wiebe, or you can watch us on YouTube as well. And if you can't catch us live, it's on demand along with the MLS Today daily show featuring David Goss, 11 a.m. Eastern every single day, plus the MLS After Dark show on Saturdays and Sundays. We go through 10 teams from the power rankings. You can read those at MLSsoccer.com. And we're starting with number 5 in the New York Red Bulls. Hudson River Derby, L at home. First time since 2017, though, Mark Fishkin of Seeing Red. You are a legend, and Tati has become a legend, but this couldn't have been happy watching from you, I wouldn't think.
Couldn't they have sold him before the weekend? I mean, did they have to wait until after the game to transfer him?
It's wonderful pettiness. If that's what they were doing, like, you know what? Let's keep you around for one more Hudson
since
River
2017,
Derby.
Tati. I mean, you're just the type of personality to rub one in the Red Bulls' faces before you go.
Listen, I would much rather have a 3-0 Open Cup win over these guys than a 1-0 home loss during the league. But, I mean, I think you have to tip your cap. It was a phenomenal play. Yeah, New York Sixes didn't close down Rodriguez quickly enough, and it was a fantastic finish by Tati, and he'll be terrorizing players in Spain now. But I like where the Red Bulls are right now. They're third in the East. They're in the semifinals of the Cup. Based on where they've been the last 3 seasons, this is a really strong team. Are they an elite team in MLS? I don't know. Is 5th elite on your power rankings list? I'm amazed that you guys, I think, got it right. They lost at home to a really good team, and they didn't drop in your rankings. I think they're a contender. Their issues, I think, are evident. And hopefully in the transfer window, they'll do something to fix it. But I think they're in a good place.
So you mentioned the transfer window, and that is the big question with this team. I have 2 questions here. One, do you expect them to do anything in the transfer window? And 2, are they that one piece from being elite? Because to me, there's a strong argument that they are, a number 9 away from being a top 3 team in the power rankings instead of top 5 team.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, let's just say there are 23 teams that I think would like to be number 5. So, I think there are 2 ways to think about it. The first is Struber's system, right? And in Struber's system, the forwards don't necessarily need to be pumping the goals in at a 15 goals a season clip, because you have your wingbacks pushed up, you have your 10s doing magic, you've got Laquinhas magic, you've got Lewis Morgan leading the league in goal, the team in goals, excuse me. That said, I think playing without a 9 this past weekend was an interesting wrinkle, and then bringing on Tom Barlow as your first choice at forward off the bench was quite a statement by Struber.
Hey, let me ask just directly right now. Have they given up on Klimala?
I mean, I know that Tommy Scoops had that great tweet, which is, you bring these other players on before Klimala. What does that say about him? I mean, I think Red Bull fans are ready to move on. I think, listen, you've just in theory gotten an $8 million check from Leipzig for the Tyler Adams transfer to Leeds. You've got rid of 3 or 4 international slots on your roster by moving along a bunch of players that were brought in 2020. I think you have to go out and get at least a passable 9, someone to push these guys and someone that can turn and score. I mean, that said, you don't see a lot of balls played on the ground to feet by this team. I mean, it's a lot of shots from inside the box by the 10s that are the goals here. So is it the players that you have? Is it the system that you're playing? I don't know.
Are we bumping up against the ceiling for this system?
I mean, if the ceiling is number 5, a strong but not the absolute elite of the league, maybe, but it's still a pretty good place to be, I'd argue. I think as the summer goes on, it'll be really interesting to see if these guys just start to wilt from running themselves into the ground till the 70th minute from the starting whistle. And I think you guys have noted, the plan B is not really performing here. The good news is, I mean, they've got a game in Austin that, for me, you play the kids in and you focus everything on the Open Cup semi the following midweek against Orlando, because I think that's a winnable game. And then they've got 6 of 9 at home down the stretch, and that's when you pick up the points. So I hope they bring someone in. Struber says they've been talking to players, and when they find the right one, they'll pull the trigger. I hope it's soon. Red Bull fans hope it's soon. It's a shame to drop a derby match in front of a huge crowd, the biggest home crowd at Red Bull Arena since 2018, easy on the weekend.
Yeah, it looked like an absolute wonderful day. Missed taking the path, getting over to Harrison, hitting Red Bull Arena maybe someday soon. Orlando hosting Red Bulls, you mentioned US Open Cup semi, Wednesday, July 27th. That's basically a week from now. I remember being on the field in Kansas City when the Red Bulls lost the final. How much does this particular trophy, this run, mean to the club and to the supporters?
Thanks for bringing that up, Kansas. I really appreciate that.
I just live here, man. I just live here. It's hard not to forget. It's hard not to forget.
Every time I see Latif Blessing, I shudder because the Red Bulls let the smallest.
I do a little dance. I do a little dance. It's a little jig, if you remember correctly. Afterwards, he and I had a moment.
Yeah, no, I mean the cup. The team is all in for the Open Cup. They've said as much since the beginning of the year. I think they're the best team left in the competition. I don't think there's a lot to argue against that. I mean, SKC has picked up some points. They took Orlando to the woodshed at Exploria earlier this season. They beat them so thorough. I have never seen a beatdown as bad as they delivered to Orlando City earlier this year. And that's when Luquinhas had just arrived. So, and they would, if Sacramento can do a number on SKC, the Red Bulls would host the final. I think if you're them, you go all in. They're 2 games from their first Knockout Cup trophy in 27 years. You got to go get it.
I personally, Mark, would like the Red Bulls to win that match because I would like to come to New York because we are going to cover that Open Cup final. We'll be there on the field, and maybe I'm doing a jig with some folks in red this time around. I've seen a lot of Shields won there. I'm just saying.
You guys are out so far over your skis, man. You're talking about the Red Bulls.
That's my brand,
baby.
Competition. That's my brand. That's the Red Bulls brand in knockout competitions as well. Mark Fishkin of Seeing Red. Mark, thank you so much for taking the time, man. It is always a pleasure to chat.
Hey, be well, guys. Talk to you soon.
All right. Let's keep it going here on the Power Ranking Show from 5 to 7. We go Real Salt Lake. Speaking of Sporting Kansas City and woodsheds, they got taken to the woodshed in Sandy the other night. RSL it's an interesting team, Doyle, because it's like a team that I didn't expect that much of to start the season. And then they started strong and they got results. And then when they started dropping points, somehow I got disappointed. But RSL 7th in the power rankings, RSL comfortably in the playoffs in the top 3 in the Western Conference. There's no other way to describe this season as a success, but I still have sort of question marks about whether it's sustainable. What do you think?
I have those same question marks, though. I think that they've been playing better, and it's weird to say this because this win snapped a little 4-game winless skid for them, but they've actually been playing better, and we're starting to see some identity with this team, and that was the answer against Sporting Kansas City was they were really good at switching the field of play, creating wide overloads, and then getting multiple runners in the box. And that's what they did really well last year. The difference was last year, Damir Krylak was one of those runners, and he's so good at those trailing runs to the back post and, being the second or third man in and using his head. And I think they were missing that, and they've kind of rediscovered a little bit of that even without him recently. Part of it is that Ruiz has been so good in central midfield. You have to take this guy's left foot away or he's going to carve you open. And which is what happened against Sporting KC. He was just pinging diagonals left and right the whole game. And Sporting Kansas City were 2 steps behind the play. And if that's going to be the case, then you're going to give up a couple of goals. And especially once Sporting went down to 10 when Roger got that red card. So I think it was an affirmation of what this team can be in terms of how they want to play. And I'm not sure that the first half of the season really was that. The first half of the season was just an affirmation of their willingness to fight. The first half of the season was an affirmation of Pablo Mastroeni, his belief that the human spirit will beat analytics every time, because they're like, just analytically speaking, there's no way that RSL should have been above the line heading into July. They got there because they just refused to quit. They had the highest X-Dog in the league. But now they're adding some ball to that. And with Justin Glad getting healthy, with Ruiz playing so well, with Jefferson Savarino coming in and playing.
Savarino's the big one.
Yeah, playing as a number 10, they can win some games just on raw quality. They can win some games on talent. And then on top of that, they still have 2 DP slots open. One of them supposedly going to be for Gustavo Cuellar. That rumor's been out there for months. He would instantly be one of the best D-mids in the league. I'm not sure what the other one is going to be. But they've got some powder dry and some moves they could make now on the back half of the season, so that maybe the underlying stuff in the eye test can start matching up with where they are in the standings even better.
I think you got to give credit to the entire organization.
Yep.
Not just in some of the sort of the outward things and the flash when it comes to the experience and the sellouts. I think they're at 10 this year. They haven't lost a game at home. There's a reason for that. The whole community is re-engaged in the team. But I think in just sort of surviving and having a foundation to build upon during what is probably, with a lot of teams sort of competing for this moniker, the most shaky foundation in the league over the last couple of years, just with the amount of changes and chops and drama that was happening for them at the front office level, to be in a position now with new ownership, and as ownership evaluates needs, to say, well, we actually do have a foundation in place. We actually have a manager in Pablo who's able to get more out of the pieces that we had from the start. We actually have a skeleton here, and it would have been easy for them to have nothing and to have to start over and to be sitting in the bottom of the West, and for everybody to say, oh, okay, well, that makes perfect sense that they are here. To be third, to have Justin Meram hitting 50-50 and being resurgent in his career at the age of almost 34. I mean, they lose Bobby Wood. It hasn't seemed to bother him that much. Cordova has not been maybe as at the level goal-scoring wise as Build. They haven't had Damir Kreilach. I mean, if you told me start of the season, no Damir Kreilach, I mean, I'm telling you, there's no chance they're making the playoffs.
I would have said 15 points in the number 2 draft pick. That's what I mean.
It just didn't seem possible. So you got to give a ton of credit to RSL for being in this position. Number 7 in these power rankings. Minnesota are 8. Let's bring in Jeff Rueter of The Athletic. And Minnesota are rolling. And when Minnesota are rolling, you can bet one thing, Jeff, and that is Emmanuel Reynoso is fueling it. He is balling. 2 goals against DC, overmatched DC. The man, he can finish. If you're watching on YouTube, you are seeing the class that he brings. This is good loons, Jeff, right?
This is good loons. And I think what's weird is that, for all of the talk, and I feel like, hi, Matt, I feel like we have the same segment every time I come on, right? We have the exact same segment every time I come on. And it's either starts with the loons are good, what's happened different, and the loons are bad, what's happened different. I know I just described the power ranking show in like one sentence, but the answers are the same, which I think is what's crazy. Is opponents lately have not found a way to contain Emmanuel Reynoso, and I think that he's gotten some of that chip on the shoulder that he needs when he's a comfortable player, when he's a player who feels like his spot isn't at risk, when he feels like the team can carry him around him. Sometimes he does not check out of games, but like I've seen him go with the safer option more frequently in those cases. But lately, with the scrutiny, with his inability to get assists in particular, the goals were coming at the early third of the season, but not the assists nearly as much. With how teams were forcing him to distribute from out wide rather than being able to play in his central channel that he thrives in. He was struggling, especially with some of those conference games. But lately, he's been able to get into his rhythm. He's been able to find some space to operate. He's been maybe a little bit more adventurous and direct with his play rather than trying to be a little bit more of a possession-oriented playmaker. And it's made all the difference for Minnesota lately.
Jeff, how much of this 5-game run is Minnesota having figured it out in the ways that you just described, and how much of it is the schedule being a little bit soft? Someone might even call them bonus games. I don't know.
I don't know who would do that.
Yeah, I don't know who would do that. Yeah, certainly not MLS.com. No, I think that the schedule's done them some favors. They've certainly played some matchups that are friendlier than going back to back and having to go to Seattle and then 3 days later go to LASC. And then, they've had some gauntlets in the first part of the season, make no mistake about that. I think what's impressing me about their form over the last 5 games in particular is that most of this has happened with Robin Lod playing as a central midfield.
Dude, he's been awesome. He's been so good there. It's unreal.
It's ridiculous. He's somehow both the team's best two-way midfielder and the team's best goal scorer. So I guess he's just the Finnish Damir Krylov. But it's been incredible. And for so much of the first season, the question was, can anyone else score besides Robin Lod? And then the first time that lineup graphic came out, and Minnesota, credit to them, is one of the few organizations that actually tells you the formation the team will play and who was going to play in what spots. The first time he was listed as that midfielder, I think everyone was like, great. So 0-0, a lot of chances created, maybe a set piece if we're lucky. And they've been fantastic. The synergy's been flowing. I think getting Adrian Unu out of the locker room, he wasn't a bad guy. He was actually very well liked by his teammates. He was very proactive in his outreach to like the local children's hospital and everything. He was not a bad character issue, but I think that having a backup DP striker on the bench did not help Luis Amaria's confidence. And I don't think it's a coincidence that since he's moved on to Angers back over into France, Amaria has looked much more confident, looked a lot more trusted, and has certainly been playing better as a result.
Let's talk All-Star game. Actually, you know what? Let's do transfers first, because Tom Bogert dropped a little bit of something on the timeline this morning. The Minnesota United bid $5 million for a Bordeaux South Korean international striker. They're still going after that 9, huh? Amaria be damned, huh?
Yeah, and you always have to wonder with this team, like who's getting reshuffled. And Adrian Heath has talked to me in the past before at The Athletic and talked about how he's more particular and has greater scrutiny for his strikers than any other position, given his history playing the position during his past life as a striker. And so, I think that you see it a lot with this kind of revolving door, this churn, this idea that you can't just have good, dependable domestic depth or a good domestic strike option. I mean, they really haven't trusted anyone who isn't a TAM or DP option up top since they traded Ramirez midway through 2018, Christian Ramirez, that is. So it's not a surprise. It's certainly not a surprise coming from Tommy Scoops either. Man's everywhere, but yeah, I don't know. Sometimes you keep going back to the same well and you hope eventually the water's going to be drinkable.
So you don't think they're going to use a DP slot on a winger?
They should. I think that's probably the better answer. They absolutely should. I think the last place they should use it right now is striker, just because you need to at least give someone a chance to establish a firm footing in that position, which has not been the case pretty much ever since the team's done MLS, actually. I would use it on a winger. You could also convince me that given the injuries to Kervin Arriaga, now Will Trapp has some injury issues, maybe you could use it as central midfielder and be able to just kind of dictate games a little bit better. But no, to me, I agree with you. It's a left winger. It's someone who's able to do what Kevin Molino was doing for them in 2020, maybe even to a higher level with greater consistency and fewer injury risks. But hey, what do I know?
Maybe a rental for Kevin Molino for the rest of the year. Seems like Dab God's got it locked up on the left in Columbus. Before we let you go, let's talk All-Star game.
Yep.
Blackheart, the Sunday before, extra time. I expect you to be there and to be on stage with us. Do you accept this? Do you accept this invitation, Jeff?
This is great. I haven't gotten a groomsman invite in a long time. Yeah, absolutely, I'll be there. Just let me know which color Henley I need so that I don't match Doyle, and we'll be good to go.
Well, Doyle's not showing up, so you'll be good to go on that front. Tell me what this. Yeah, there you go. Grow a beard. I can't get it to that level, so if you can, do your best. What does the All-Star game mean to Minnesota? Like, what's this going to be like for people that fly in or drop in or want to make a little vacation out of it or are looking from afar?
Yeah, they're proud of it. They're proud of that stadium too, and they have every reason to be. Allianz Field has been, truly fantastic for the organization, for the players, for the community of Minnesota soccer. Anyway, it hasn't quite done the neighborhood kind of rising that they had hoped, but the pandemic obviously changed a lot of that. But I think it just kind of reinforces that Minnesota's here to stay. This is a market that just historically was so unwanted. I mean, literally known as the team that nobody wanted before they went to Major League Soccer. because they couldn't find an owner in the NASL era, even as they were winning titles. And so to not only be in Major League Soccer, to not only have one of the finest stadiums in Major League Soccer, but to also be hosting the All-Star Game and be able to have the second iteration of the Liga MX's MLS All-Star Game too, which then kind of still has that additional verve to it. I think it's something that they're excited about. And if the team's playing better around it, all the better as well. If they've got 2 players on it and, whenever the coach picks his own guys, you kind of look and wonder who maybe was left off, but I don't think that you can really make a case to leave off either Dane St. Clair or Manuel Reynoso. So I think the fact that they have some representation also helps, and they'll be very, very excited for that date in August.
All right, some Buffalo Wings in the future. Jeff, some
Juicy Lucy's,
some complimentary beverages. I have had a Juicy Lucy in my time in Minnesota. Don't know if I'll be back on those, but Jeff's got the good after dark food options that I don't get in my family life here in Kansas City. So we'll trade Midwestern cities. All right, Jeff, thank you so much for your time, man.
Yeah, keep up the good work, guys.
All right, on to 11. Big rise for Minnesota, up 5 spots to 8. On to 11. Nashville SC after a loss at home to LAFC. Doyle, they've made a big signing here in the transfer window, a long-rumored one, finally coming to fruition. That would be Shaq Moore from Tenerife, trading the Canary Islands for Tennessee. A big move for them, strengthening that right back spot. Of course, they made a ton of allocation money when they moved Alistair Johnson and then had tried a variety of guys there, but Alex Muil and Eric Miller being the main ones. Shaq Moore comes in with an opportunity to not only have a long-term contract here and a long-term home, but be an every-game starter and maybe work his way into the World Cup team for the U.S. About $2 million is the transfer fee, so you'd assume he'd be a TAM player. Mm-hmm. What do you think of the signing?
I think he'll instantly be one of the best right backs in the league. And I think that he fits, whether he's playing as a right back or a right wing back, because, Gary Smith has been willing to play either sort of a 4-5-1 or a 4-4-2 sometimes. And I think their main formation really has been a 3-5-2. Moore in either spot is going to add to this team on both sides of the ball because he's very good at getting forward and crossing the ball. And crossing from deep has kind of gone out of fashion because it's a low probability play. Most teams don't rely upon it. Nashville does. Nashville loves to cross the ball. Gary Smith this winter told his staff, go out and find me someone who can cross the ball from right back. That's why he wasn't in love with Alistair Johnston as a right wing back. Didn't think he was a good enough crosser. Shaq Moore checks those boxes. And by the way, they offered more for Julian Gressel this winter than what he was just traded for. So they were willing to look in the league. Once that didn't happen, they went outside the league, and Shaq Moore just makes a ton of sense. And I think the guy who's going to benefit from it most is CJ Sapong. CJ hasn't scored in about 2 months. He's still a crucial part of that team, but he's only got 5 goals on the season, and he just hasn't been threatening. So it checks a lot of boxes that had been unchecked for this year, and I think it'll make them better. But I think they're still at a point where they only have one guy who can create any kind of magic, and Hani Mukhtar's great, but he's not Sebastian Jovinko 2015 or Carlos Vela 2019 level great. So they're kind of stuck in third gear, even with this signing.
How do you resolve the Ake Loba situation? Because I'm an optimist. I strive to be, and I still just struggle to see that working out in a way that elevates them in the way that it needs to, both in the amount spent and the profile that he had. It just, how do you alleviate that? And I'm sitting here thinking about how much allocation money they have because they've collected it from all over. And Mike Jacobs is so good at building a bank and also understanding where the moves within the league are that he wants to make. I look across at LAFC, the team they're playing. I'm like, what if they sign a DP and Arango's on the market? Would they rather get all that TAM for him? Or
Arango wouldn't fit for Nashville for the same reason that Ake Loba doesn't fit. He's not a target forward. It's pretty clear at this, but even though Gary Smith had a hand in the Ake Loba signing, it's pretty clear that he didn't see him as his main number 9 because Gary Smith wants someone who can dominate in the air, can be a back to goal type of player, can be a classic type of target forward. And that look, there are other reasons Ake Loba's not playing, but if you want the big one for why he's not up there every game, I think it's because he doesn't fit that prototype. And it's the same reason why I think like there's just no chance they would be in for Arango. He's a fox in the box type. He's not going to body a defender. He's more about combination play and getting on the end of stuff rather than, the type of like really, rugged, mano-a-mano work that CJ Sapong has to do. As to how to fix the Ake Loba thing, maybe I think it's at the point where at the end of the season, they're just going to have to buy him out because a year and a half and he's getting like human victory cigar minutes. That's not it for a DP.
Cincinnati hosting Nashville this weekend. Interesting one. We'll talk Cincinnati here in a little bit. That's on MLS Live on ESPN Plus on Saturday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. Okay, keep it going here. On to Orlando City we go. We've talked a little bit about them because they're hosting the Red Bulls in about 8 days in the U.S. Open Cup semifinals. 1-1 draw against Atlanta. The goal they did get, Rocco Rios Novo hanging out on the post. I mean, you see right here on YouTube, the whistle's blown. 2, 3, 4. There were 4 seconds between the blowing of that whistle and Pereira scoring the goal. But that's the only goal that Orlando managed. And while they did put a little pressure on in the second half, Atlanta sort of flipped the script and was running down their throats. And this 1-1 draw to me is, I mean, it's just sort of indicative of their whole season. Like they'll have a flash or two, and then it'll sort of dry up, and they're not able to blank teams. They have to rely on Gallese, who was just truly an octopus in this one. And here we are. And it's weird because it's sort of like what I was saying earlier about RSL, where you're a little disappointed in what they are and how they're playing, but they're not they're not RSL. They're not at the top of the West, but they're like safely a playoff team. This team just continues to baffle me. Like I can't tell. I know they're not good, but I also know they're not bad.
Yeah. And to be fair, there's about 15, 18 teams in MLS that kind of fit that mold this year for whatever reason. It's been that type of year where there's this massive middle class, and Orlando's part of it. And they're part of it because they don't play particularly good soccer. They certainly don't do so consistently anyway. But they don't let themselves, I guess how I put it, they have enough individual quality so that they don't often get blown out. So they're always hanging around. They always have the ability to get a goal like Pereira's and just hang on for dear life. And look, we've seen Oscar Pereira teams do that in the past. His Dallas teams were great, but all of them spent a good chunk of the season just grinding out results, right? It wasn't pure Joga Bonita the whole time. They could definitely wear you down. And that's what Orlando City has kind of had to be. My concern with that is even when they're doing that, they're not particularly good defensively through midfield. And I don't know why, because they have a ton of talent. Like Junior Ursa is a good player. Araujo, the Uruguayan kid that they picked up this winter to play D-mid, he's a very talented young player. They have Jackson Mendez on the bench. They have answers, but none of them seem to be able to work together in that midfield and create any sort of control. I've looked into the numbers. I've watched the games, but I can't put my finger on it. I can't tell you why it's happening this way.
If you're watching on YouTube, you're seeing maybe the save of the entire season from Pedro Gallese, just truly all the way outstretched, taking one of the top corner from Dom Dwyer's left foot. Look, a 1-1 draw at Atlanta in previous years probably would have been something to hang their hat on. But in the state that Atlanta United is in, I'm sure they're going to be a little bit disappointed. But hey, Orlando's still hanging in there, still up for an Open Cup win to get that knockout round trophy off the books. So I don't know. I have nothing to say about this team that's definitive, and I just am waiting for the rest of the season to see what they are able to do with themselves, and if they can find a little bit more balance and a little bit more explosion from the attacking players that were supposed to provide it.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I do think that they have a chance to change their season in this transfer window by going out and upgrading at left back. They back in 2020 during MLS's back, João Moutinho was maybe the best left back in the league, and he was so good. And they were overwhelming people with the ball. They were overwhelming teams with the ball, and he was a huge part of that. He got injured right after that. Has not been remotely the same player in the past 2 years. And without him, they've had to go to a series of Band-Aids there. And I think maybe it's just a fact of if the fullbacks can't provide you much in possession, you're not going to be able to be a team that dominates through central midfield. It just has that knock-on effect within the context of a soccer team. So maybe it's just like, okay, we upgrade that spot and everything clicks into place. I do expect them to be looking specifically for a left back this window.
It is worth reminding ourselves that the attacking pieces that are supposed to carry the load outside of Pato are newish.
Yep.
And coming from overseas. So we'll see. Orlando has the potential. It's just been some waiting to see if they can get there. 14, Cincinnati. They have potential, but a lot of it is tied to Lucho and to a lesser degree lately, Brenner. Lucho remains out with the suspension, I believe, this weekend with Nashville coming to town. What have you seen from them without Lucho?
They're still dangerous. They're still really, really dangerous in this game. They put Columbus on the heels quite a bit. Vasquez could have had 3 assists. You're seeing one right now if you're watching it on YouTube. He also had a knockdown header for Alan Cruz that he put over, and there's one other in the second half. The guys just didn't quite finish. It happens. I mean, Eloy Room had a pretty great game in goal, but part of it is like, okay, if you're having to use Vasquez like that, then he's not the guy who's sort of finishing these sequences off by getting into goal scoring positions. And he's been their best goal scorer this year. And that's what the absence of Lucho was in this particular game. The other thing that really hurts them is they have, at this point, they play primarily in a 3-5-2. It was a 4-2-3-1 this game. They ask a lot from their wingbacks in terms of creating chances. In the same way, no, I don't want to say the same way, but in a similar way to what we were talking about with Nashville. And none of the wingbacks that are currently healthy are particularly good at getting the edge, getting to the end line, and then crossing with any sort of accuracy. Now, Ronald Mazzarita comes back in a couple weeks. I think that'll help on the left. On the right, though, they're still kind of suffering because of the previous roster build. And I think that, when you think about it in context, even if they end up falling short of the playoffs, which is what I think will happen, it's just such a massive year-over-year improvement that you got to tip your hat regardless and kind of enjoy what we're seeing from the foundation from this team and what they can be, I think, in 2023 and into the future.
Were you surprised that Tyler Blackett and Jeff Cameron both were on the bench for this rivalry game?
No,
I know they had midweek.
Yeah, I don't think either guy has played particularly well. I was a little bit surprised that Blackett got the extension that he did, and like maybe that's just Chris Albright saying like, more important right now is locker room leadership and continuity, and maybe Blackett helps in that regard, which is why they decided to keep him around. But Cincinnati has given them about 37 goals. They still have one of the worst defenses in the league, and that's even with bringing in a D mid who's been really good. That's even with playing just better overall soccer. Like they have work to do on that back line, and I'm not sure that many of the guys who are there, including those 2 veterans, are part of the long-term solution.
2-0 losers in hell is real. FC Cincinnati, Nashville coming to town over the weekend. Okay, keep it rolling here. New England at 17. Points dropped from winning positions, 24, Doyle. They've given up, I think, 14 goals in the last 15 minutes of games.
Yeah.
The tide turned. Turned quickly. Same thing happened against the Union this weekend. You go up 1-0. You end up losing 2-1. This is like one of the more MLS things I've ever seen, which is a record-setting points team turning around and then not like they're flirting with the playoffs. And right now the playoffs are kind of giving them the cold shoulder.
Yeah, I think they'll end up making the playoffs. They were on a 10-game unbeaten run up until last weekend. And then they faced two of the toughest away trips in the league at NYCFC, a game which was totally upended because of 3 penalties and a red card. And then this game, which I thought New England was probably the better team through 65 minutes. But then when Jim Curtin switched back to the 4-4-2 and made the Revs spend all the rest of the game defending in the box, like that exposed the Achilles heel. Kessler, Farrell, and Bell have not been as good scrambling defensively this year. All 3 guys have struggled. Obviously, Omar Gonzalez was supposed to be part of the solution. He was so poor that he's fallen out of the rotation entirely. But it took literally 70 minutes for the Eastern Conference's best team to finally put the Revs in that situation. So even with these 2 losses on the trot, I think I really feel like the Revs are actually heading in the right direction.
I'm going to bring in Seth Macomber from the Bent Musket real quick. Seth, can you tell us anything about what's going on as far as the transfer market? I mean, Veroni arriving is a big deal. Is there any other business to be done for the Revs in this summer?
Yeah, Veroni's a big deal. Veroni got introduced to the media today, and the best thing I can say is that he's really excited to be here. Very nice guy, constantly saying hello to every media member who is speaking to him. And he, we asked him about his future and potentially being sold on at some point. He says, "I'm here to score goals repeatedly. I'm happy to be here. The team has invested a lot in me." And he's excited to get going right after he did his first training session today. As far as future transfers, I asked Bruce Arena about it last week. He said it's possible that he's going to look at options inside the league and outside the league. In my opinion, it is something that he should think about. And if you look back in 2020, what he did really well was he found pieces around the league and was able to kind of swap out some assets. So that was during the time when Carlos Gil was injured, and they brought in Lee Nguyen, they brought in Tommy McNamara, they brought in Kakuta Mane. Lee Nguyen was a short-term rental, the same thing with Mane, but Tommy McNamara has become a pretty central part for this team. So I think for Bruce Arena, he's well aware of what his team is and what this team needs, and he knows enough people that he's able to swap out some assets. Of course, the issue here is that the Revolution do not have a open international slot right now, and obviously some of the pieces within the roster are a little tight. But Bruce Arena is well aware. I asked him, how does it feel this season? Because if you think about it, there's a lot of turnover that's happened this year. So not only is he trying to rebound and push forward on a really stellar year and try to keep that momentum going, but he's doing it while trying to rebuild the team. So not going to full rebuild mode, but try to find those pieces that are going to replace a Matt Turner, a Tajon Buchanan, and an Adam Buxa. So there's a lot that he has to do to push forward, and some of those pieces are coming in, and we'll see how it all fits together.
If he was going to go out in the league and get reinforcements in one position, what would it be?
I think you have to look at the center back position, largely because of the injuries and suspensions that we've seen. I think if you have Andrew Farrell and Henry Kessler all year, you're doing okay, and you're avoiding some of the mistakes that we're seeing. But Andrew Farrell was suspended this past game. If you look back at the CCL game, he was injured for that one, so he was unavailable, and that's where that collapse happened. And then Henry Kessler has really struggled with hamstring injuries. I talked to him after a game. How was he feeling after he made his first 45 minutes coming back recently? And he said, "I feel good. The team is really trying to make sure they don't rush me back too much because they want to make sure they get it right this time. With hamstrings, it can be really frustrating." Even referencing Gio Reyna and saying that we're seeing this with other players as well, that it's just tough with a hamstring injury. I think when those two are out there and they're building that chemistry and working, they can do just fine. If you follow me on Twitter, you see that I often post videos of Henry Kessler and how good he can be at putting out fires. Like Doyle often mentions, the way the Revolution play, they're leaving that space in behind. And that's something that I think Omar Gonzalez kind of struggled with. But Henry Kessler can provide that coverage a little bit better. The other thing to kind of mention here, and you brought it up, Wiebe, is that like there's just a lot of mistakes that are happening. The Revolution have been in the lead so many times this season. I know Bogart tweeted it out, but I've been keeping a track all throughout the season of how often they get in the lead and then dropped points. some of those are so odd. I mean, at one point, you have Henry Kessler throwing this guy to the ground, Petrovic, running out there and missing on a clearance. It was a 0-0 game that ended up being a loss, but let's not forget about that time that the ball ricocheted off of Matt Polster against the Red Bulls and ended up in the back of the net. So there's all the things that went right last year are really going wrong now. It's now just about getting everyone on there, everyone healthy. And if you can bring in a little bit more competition at that center back or even defensive midfielder role, that's what I see that they can do. I think the issue is that we're probably not looking at the 4-2-3-1 anymore. We're probably looking at a 4-4-2 now that we have two strikers that are DPs.
We will see how Bruce puts it together and how it all fits. Right now, below the playoff line after winning the Shield last year, 25 points, just 2 points separating them from Cincy in 7th, and they are going to Columbus this weekend. So space in behind and Cucho, those things don't always mix. Big thanks, Seth, for jumping in and giving us an update, man.
Yeah, thank you, guys.
All right, on to 22, Chicago Fire. Boy, it looked like they were washed out, Doyle.
Yeah.
Cucho seemed like he did it to him. And then they go win 2 games in a row, and all of a sudden there's some hope again. Because if you look at the Eastern Conference, just like the Western Conference, from Chicago in 12th on 23 points to Cincinnati, it's now just a 4-point gap.
Yeah.
Up 6 spots. Chicago still alive, still breathing, still possibly that shot of Malort in my future.
Still possibly, yeah. I don't know, dude. I thought they were dead.
They looked dead.
We did this show last week, right? And we didn't even even in the pre-show, we were like, no, let's not talk about that.
Yeah, come on, we don't want to have a funeral on the show. You know what I mean?
It just goes to show what a weird league it is, and what a weird season it's been. Because this is, if anything, it reminds me of the late aughts when nobody could create any separation in the standings, and everybody was one good week away from catching everybody else, and the Fire just had themselves a good week. They picked up 6 points, and now granted, neither were real 6-pointers. One was against Toronto, and the other was against a Sounders team that's struggling right now. But you can only play the games in front of you, and you can only beat the teams in front of you, and Chicago's been doing that a little bit now. They've won 4 of their last 7. And they've done it by, in over the past month and a half, that faceplant against Columbus is an outlier because they did it to themselves. The Fire did in that game. They made simple mistakes and switched off and got punished like they've been getting punished for most of the past dozen years. But for the most part, they've eliminated that over the past 7 games. For the most part, they've limited their individual errors, and by having more solidity, back line, defensive midfield, and goal, the attack has had sort of the platform it needs to blossom a little bit. And back in the playoff race, Wiebe, the Chicago Fire, they're not done yet, I guess.
Isn't there? Maybe this is the Malort fueled side of me. Isn't there a part of this that you say, okay, if they can stop just shooting themselves in the foot and sort of the way they have for many years now, there is a ton of upside that's not being realized, whether it's Shaqiri or Shabilko, or the fact that Jairo Torres is not fully integrated yet. That John Duran, we're just sort of seeing the first flashes from him. Gutierrez, the homegrown kid's playing really well. There's a side of me that, it doesn't seem wise, but could Joe Mansueto kind of alluded to in his interview with the Sun-Times, which is really good. I encourage anybody out there to go read it. You can talk yourself into some positivity with this team. There are some reaches there, but is it that big of a reach to think that maybe Shaqiri could find a run of form ahead of the World Cup? That Shabilko could be a huge beneficiary of that run of form, that Jairo Torres could now get comfortable and be more of a game changer in the final third, that Chris Mueller could keep doing what he's doing. Rafa Schijos, Gago Slonina, now that he's settled, removes all the errors that were sort of compounding. There's a world in which this could get playoff better.
There is. And I think that's the baseline, right? Okay, or I wouldn't say the baseline, but
Best case, that's the best possible
that's the best case scenario.
It's not likely, I wouldn't argue.
Yeah,
but it's
not
very
likely,
possible. It's
and
very possible.
I don't think it's a team like I would quibble with the way you termed it as a ton of upside. I think there's some upside there, but
they haven't realized like any of that upside. That's why I say a ton. Like, when you haven't
there's
realized
just a
any of
gap.
it, there's.
But like I don't think that Shaqiri, like we've seen enough of him as a number 10. He's not actually a number 10, you know. And then like Chris Mueller is a good player. He's not a great player in this league. Duran, Gutierrez, even Jairo Torres, they're so young that they're more question marks than they are sure things. So like so much has to come together. But credit to the Fire. Recently, they've been playing a lot better. Fire fans back off the ledge a little bit. So,
but still peering over.
Yeah,
still checking out the view.
Just completely ready to jump because this is the Chicago Fire after all.
Do you think there's any chance they could get Shaqiri going? I'll let it in there. Maybe you move him. Maybe you move him to the wing. Like
one of the things that we saw with Jairo Torres during this last half season with Atlas before he came to Chicago was he was playing more centrally than he was on the wing. So I think you could play him there and put Shaqiri on the right and maybe go from the 4-2-3-1 to more of a 4-3-3. That could actually work pretty well. But Ezra Hendrickson has not tinkered with the formation at all. Like he's been a 4-2-3-1 guy from the jump this year. It seems unlikely to me that he would drop that and go to a single pivot and change so much about what he's clearly been trying to build.
All right, Chicago Fire in a good place, and it's always better to be in a good place than in the bad place that they've occupied for just about a decade. That's it, just a decade or so. They are headed to Vancouver on Saturday night, and that brings us to the Vancouver Whitecaps, the 23rd spot in these power rankings. Went out and got themselves Julian Gressel, down 4 spots after drawing in Portland over the weekend. How does Julian Gressel change things for Vanni Sartini?
Well, I think it might mean we're going to see more of the 2 forward lineup that we saw in this game with Brian White and Lucas Cavallini. And Cavallini's been very, like, after a really rough 2 years, he's been very good this year. So 2 target forwards, 2 wing backs who can cross, Ryan Raposo on the left side. If you're watching this on YouTube, you're seeing that absolutely dimed cross to Brian White's head. And Gressel is one of the very best crossers in the history of the league. It's like David Beckham, Steve Ralston, Julian Gressel. Like that is the top tier for crossing the ball. I think he's second in the league in assists since 2017.
Let's give Brad Davis some love here. Just
Brad Davis too. Okay, yeah. So there you go. That's the 4th man in that top tier. And he's a natural wing back. And like they've been playing guys who are not natural wing backs out there. So Gressel can help them on both sides of the ball. It's just a completely like hand in glove type of fit. I think it'll make both center forwards better. I think it has a chance to make the back line better just because they're not going to be putting out fires and trying to scramble and recover as often. But the big thing is that it's going to open up space underneath for Ryan Gauld. And Ryan Gauld has been mostly very good since he arrived this time last year. I think last year down the stretch, he was phenomenal. But he was phenomenal because they were able to play in transition almost exclusively. And this year they've had to play more in possession, and we've seen kind of the limits of Gauld as a chance creator. He's just not an elite tier chance creator in possession. He needs more time and space. Well, if you have 2 excellent crossing fullbacks coming up, one on the right, one on the left, you stretch out the opposing defense and you give your central creators more time and space to create the types of chances that White and Cavallini need.
$900K for Julian Gressel. You mentioned earlier in the show that Nashville been after him. $900K. How much is it?
Was that?
I thought it was $900K. Did I get that wrong?
No. I said $900K. That's 100% the like it was 400,000.
Feels like in this market, that's a good deal.
Yeah, it's absolutely a steal. From what I've heard from multiple folks, Nashville offered substantially more than that for Gressel back in the winter. So this is just really well done from Vancouver, and like they've hit on some really big in interleague acquisitions already. Brian White, Tristan Blackman, I think has been very good for them at center back as well. So I think this will be the third in that line.
Vancouver Whitecaps, and they had a tough start to the season. Nobody's going to sugarcoat that one, but it's been better. They are sort of climbing here, and they're just a point back of the LA Galaxy and 3 points back, I should say, of FC Dallas. So they're right there in that playoff race in the West that sort of mirrors the East. Everybody is alive, including the San Jose Earthquakes, even down on 22 points after losing at home to Houston. That was tough, but some big news being made in San Jose recently. We're going to bring on Alex Morgan here from Quakes Epicenter to talk us through it a little bit. Alex, welcome. I should probably invite you. That would be a good start. Yes, you've requested. You're ahead of the game, Alex. I'm sorry about that. Alex, sorry. What's up, man? We got you. You've muted yourself. I blame myself for all of this, Doyle. I'm so very sorry. Let's see.
There we go.
We had been, but this was as disjointed an intro as I've ever done, Alex, and that's certainly saying something. Tell us about the news being made in San Jose, both in terms of Chris Leach talking through sort of a transfer strategy this summer and the idea that maybe Landon Donovan could be the manager of this club at some point.
Well, we had the chance to speak to Chris Leach yesterday. He spoke to a couple of us, and honestly, I think a lot of fans were a little disappointed with the news because there wasn't a ton of new information that he had to share. It's pretty much the same thing we've been hearing for the last couple of weeks, which is that the Quakes have a list of finalists for the new head coaching job. They're finishing up in-person interviews. But he's not in any rush. He made it very clear he's not in any rush to make that decision. Even though the Earthquakes are at the bottom of the table, even though they're losing hope for the playoffs, he is willing to take his time. He has a lot more patience than I think a lot of fans have the stomach for. And so Landon Donovan has been reported to be in that short list, in that list of finalists. A couple other names that people have been talking about are Ian Russell, who's an assistant coach at FC Toronto, has a lot of history with the Earthquakes organization. And then also Luchi Gonzalez is the name that I think everybody has pegged as the number one choice. He's currently an assistant coach for the U.S. men's national team, obviously took Dallas to the playoffs a couple times. So Luchi Gonzalez is, I think at this point, the front runner in a lot of people's minds for the head coaching position. But look, Chris Leach made clear that they're still interviewing, and he's perfectly fine waiting. He said that they might make the decision this season, or they could wait until the end of the year and keep Alex Cavello and his staff on as an interim coaching staff. Really, I think the more pressing concern for him at this moment is their business in the summer transfer window. Because if you watch the Quakes play last weekend against Houston, you know that they don't have enough depth at the back. That's the main issue for them right now, is that they look like a tired team and they have no options back there to step in and save that defense. And so Chris Leach said that they're looking at multiple options, both internationally and domestically in the transfer window in multiple defensive positions. I would like to see them sign a really good DP level defensive midfielder. That's something that we've seen done recently by a couple teams in the league. Vancouver Whitecaps bringing in Andres Cubas. FC Cincinnati brought in a couple defensive midfielders and have really solidified their back line in order to protect that back line. So that's at the top of my wish list. But obviously the Quakes also need some depth in the fullback positions because they played Palmieri out of position against Houston, even though he was unwell. He told the coaching staff before the game that he was feeling sick. He wasn't doing well, and he was still their best option to play him out of position at left back. So that's just a sign that the Quakes don't have enough depth back there, especially because they let go of Showfeast and Francisco Calvo earlier in this window, and they haven't brought in any replacements. So that's what the fans are waiting for the most, is those new replacements in the back line.
Alex, those replacements are absolutely needed. Nonetheless, it seems like the Quakes have done really, really well with what they've have on hand since parting ways with Matias Almeida. I believe they have a winning record under Alex Cavello. What grade do you give Cavello and his staff at this point? What has he done right? And can you make a case for Jeremy Ebobisse to be with the U.S. national team in September's camp?
Alex Cavello has fixed a lot of the errors that Matias Almeida was making. Matias Almeida was making soccer look very, very hard in the final, 6 weeks of his coaching tenure in San Jose. And Alex Cavello has simplified a lot of that. The Quakes are playing a more zonal system now, and they're playing a little bit more defensively, looking to break on the counterattack and use the pace that they have on the wings and up top. Alex Cavello has really been able to get the best out of Jeremy Ebobisse. As you say, he's now one of the top goal scorers in the league right now. I think that he was robbed out of an MLS All-Star berth. I think that he's absolutely should have been in that roster.
Hey, if Tati goes, Alex.
Yeah, justice for Chevo. Right.
They might return the robbery might be reversed. They might return the TV.
Well, I think he absolutely deserves it because the connection that he has with Jamir Montero, San Jose's number 10, who I think is one of the most underrated players in the league right now. He's absolutely unplayable when he's at his best. I think they have a really strong connection, and they make San Jose really dangerous going forward. The attack is not the problem right now for San Jose. Everybody knows it's San Jose's defense that's giving them issues. And that's something that Alex Cavello really hasn't been able to solve. It feels like he's a little hamstrung by the lack of depth on this roster. And look, it's unclear to what extent Alex Cavello even wants this head coaching position permanently. He was the director of methodology before he stepped into this role. That's kind of an ambiguous title, but he was basically working with the youth academy in the pathway into the first team in Quakes 2 a lot. And that seems like a little bit more natural role for him. For Alex Cavello, that seems a little bit where he's more comfortable. And so even though he's done a good job, he's righted the ship, I would expect that the Quakes bring in somebody new, somebody with a ton of MLS experience. That's been the big thing that Chris Leach has been stressing. Because of they have a bit of a bad taste in their mouth after the Matias Almeida tenure. They're looking for someone who they know can succeed in MLS, who has a track record of success in Major League Soccer. And so that's why I expect they bring in someone like Luchi Gonzalez as their new head coach, rather than sticking with Alex Cavello and co.
Whether you go Luchi or Landon, probably better to wait till the end of the season for both of them. Luchi going to a World Cup with the U.S., Landon maybe to finish it out with San Diego Loyal, where we know he is connected in more ways than one. Last question for you. What do you make of the developmental curve of Cade Cowell this year?
Cade Cowell's developmental curve has been disappointing this year. He looked particularly bad in the game against Houston. He hasn't been able to score. It just looks like his confidence is shot, even when he's putting himself in good positions and getting in behind the defense. He does not have any composure in front of goal. He has a powerful shot, but he's not making use of it. He's not been able to connect with the other forwards. There's been talk about even giving him the opportunity to play for Quakes 2 and to get some of his confidence back, because right now it's really not working for him. He's lost his starting position to Benji Kikanovic. Benji Kikanovic has been scoring some goals. He looks dangerous. He has good interplay with Jeremy Ebobisse and Jamir Montero. So he's definitely the starter on that left wing now. And until Cade Cowell is able to put together a solid run of form, he's on the outside looking into this starting lineup right now. And he needs to get something going, because he had a ton of momentum last season. He looked really strong, and it feels like all of that has kind of dissipated this season.
San Jose in Portland on Saturday. MLS Live on ESPN Plus. Go check out Quakes Epicenter. Alex, thanks for the time, man. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, gentlemen. Always a pleasure.
All right, that's it for us. We've run through 10 teams in these power rankings. Go to MLSsoccer.com for the full 28. Here are your top 10. At 10, up 8 spots. Columbus Crew, Cucho time, baby. Dallas holding the top 10 despite a poor run of form for them. They go up 1 spot to 9, which is shocking. Minnesota up 5 spots at 8. Salt Lake holds at 7. Montreal at 6 in your top 5. New York Red Bulls. If you're listening live now and missed Mark Fishkin, go back on the MLS Today podcast channel and listen to that interview. Austin second in the Supporters Shield at 4. Shocking to me that they dropped, but NYCFC are up, though Tati might leave or is leaving. Phillies at 2. and LAFC is at 1. And to put a cap on the show, we were talking about Julian Gressel. Well, Axel Schuster, the CEO and sporting director of Vancouver Whitecaps, is speaking on that now. Quote, "We got the guy who is the best wingback in this league." Vanni Sartini, quote, "He fits perfectly in our system." So they're pretty happy about that one. That's it for us. Extra time coming on Thursday. Big weekend coming up as well. And the All-Star game coming up in about 3 weeks before that U.S. Open Cup semifinals. Doyle, adios, man. Thanks for your time. Appreciate you.
Take care, everybody.